Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Dina, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dina Morris-Liga, Director of the Women's Advancement Initiative, and I'd like to welcome you all to March, the celebration of Women's History Month. Tonight, we're going to be celebrating 50 years of Title IX. We're going to have a brief definition of Title IX and then welcome our panelists, Congresswoman Jahana Hayes, Estela López, and Dr. Beverly, to discuss Title IX's impact. The discussion is going to be moderated by Dr. Annette Rogers, followed by a question and answer session moderated by University of Hartford student Hannah Arasem. So our theme for Women's History Month is elevating women, equity, equality, and beyond. We have a full month of amazing events scheduled, and the goal of this programming is really to celebrate the contributions of women in our past, present, and future. So in recognition of this month, we encourage you to join us for the slate of programs consisting of guest speakers and great conversations. So we hope to see you all again. As we begin tonight's event, it's important really for us to have a definition of what Title IX is. So Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So Title IX applies to schools, local and state educational agencies, and other institutions that receive federal financial assistance from the Department of Education. So the definition is written broadly about discrimination on the basis of sex, but has also been applied to discrimination on sexual orientation and gender identity. So I'm very excited to learn more about Title IX tonight, its impact, and really find out where we all can go from here. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Annette Rogers, the Associate Dean and Clinical Instructor at the University of Hartford's Barney School of Business. Dr. Rogers teaches courses in management, leadership, power and influence, change management, and group dynamics. Thank you so much for moderating our discussion this evening.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Dina. I'd like to now take a moment and introduce Hannah Arasem. She is going to be our question and answer moderator. Hannah goes by Han, is a senior psychology major with a minor in gender and sexuality studies. Han is passionate about sexuality and gender studies. After being with Dr. Janelle Carroll's teaching assistant for her sexual human behavior course for 2 semesters, Han started interning at Live Girl in New Haven, where they're helping promote their summer women's career preparatory program. Han will be taking questions and answers. You can go to the Q&A function on the left side of the bar beside the chat feature. Any questions that you have, please put in there, and Han will use those to direct those to the panelists. I'd like to now start to introduce you to our panelists tonight. And so I want to start with the panelist, Congresswoman Jahana Hayes. Thank you. Congresswoman is the U.S. representative for the 5th Congressional District of Connecticut. Representative Hayes was elected to the United States House of Representatives in November 2018, making her the first African-American woman and the first African-American Democrat to ever represent the state of Connecticut in Congress. Hayes first garnered widespread recognition while serving as a teacher at John F. Kennedy High School in Waterbury, when she was selected as the Connecticut Teacher of the Year, before going on to earn the distinction of 2016 National Teacher of the Year. In her capacity as National Teacher of the Year, she traveled the country and the world as an ambassador for public education, engaging all stakeholders in policy discussions meant to improve outcomes for students. We welcome you, Congressman Hayes, and we know that you're going to have to leave early tonight, so we will have you first once I introduce all the other panelists. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Estela López, and you will hear me call her Estela, as she prefers. Dr. Lopez retired from the Connecticut State Colleges and University Systems, where she served as the interim provost and senior vice president for academic and student affairs. She is the former vice chancellor of academic affairs of the Connecticut State University System from 2002 to 2007. In 2019, she was reappointed for a third term as a board member of the Connecticut State Board of Education and is currently the vice chair of the board. In addition, she serves on the boards of Connecticut Health and Educational Financial Authority, Bay Path University, Malta House, and the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. She's also a recipient of the Hispanic Caucus of the American Association of Higher Education Distinguished Leadership in Higher Education Award and the Illinois Latino Council in Higher Education Distinguished Service Award. In 2005, she was the recipient of the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund Award. The Latino and Puerto Rican Affairs Commission selected her as the Latino Citizen of the Year for 2006. In 2008, she was selected the Connecticut Hispanic Bar Association Achievement Award. She was selected as one of the 2017 Wonder Women by Malta House. Thank you for joining us tonight, Estela. And our next panelist, Dr. Sharon Beverly. Dr. Beverly, a nationally recognized leader in higher education, was named Acting Vice President of Athletics and Recreation at the University of Hartford in June 2021. Dr. Beverly came to Hartford with more than 30 years of higher education leadership experience in academic affairs, student affairs, and athletics at both private and public institutions. She enjoyed a successful 20-year career as a head women's basketball coach at 3 different institutions, including 11 seasons at NCAA Division I member, Fairleigh Dickinson University, where she was inducted into the school's Athletics Hall of Fame. She was named one of the 30 leading women in higher education by Diverse Magazine. Frequently sought out for her insights, vision, and strategic approach, Dr. Beverly is a past president of the Minority Athletics Association, Minority Opportunities Athletic Association, which provides generating a sports culture that supports the values necessary to teach and learn respect for all. She has also chaired NCAA committees, several of them including the prestigious Women of the Year Award. Thank you, Dr. Beverly, for joining us. What I'd like to do now is ask each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Congresswoman Hayes. I would like for you to give us a little bit of your background and bio, how Title IX has brought about changes from your point of view, and then your personal experience with Title IX in regards to your subject area. And I will start with you, Congresswoman Hayes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for pulling this very important panel together. I think that's a very easy question for me. How is Title IX? I'm a woman. I'm a woman, and everything that we do is, that's how people first identify. My position now as Congresswoman is directly influenced by all of my time in the classroom. In the previous administration, the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, made many harmful changes to Title IX, which directly impacted campus sexual assault and the way those things are reported and handled. So much of my work is spent on working to reverse those changes and really help people to have a deeper appreciation of protecting, especially young people in the school setting. Too many, the statistics are staggering. Too many young people are the victims of unwanted sexual touching, assault, uncomfortable behaviors, and really don't know how to address those things. But I think more importantly, when people talk about Title IX, I think we really get caught up in sports and athletics and different programs, but looking at it much more broadly, making sure that we are expanding those programs to girls in STEM, making sure that we are as we are passing legislation to increase career training programs, that those programs are also open to girls without discrimination. It is very difficult now to have these conversations because people think that there is no reason for Title IX. The problem is solved, that there is a reason for Title IX. It is there on purpose and intentional, and we have to continue to keep track of these things and watch over them so that we don't risk turning back 50 years. I also want to end by saying I'm super excited to have Hannah here, one of my constituents, because I think as we talk about Title IX and what these protections mean, we have to expand that to gender identity. And really, people used to say to me, you shouldn't have to teach people how to treat you. I disagree. I think we have to, grab people by the hand and walk them through the steps and answer some really difficult and uncomfortable questions so that it is not strange that we have everybody actively participating to, with their full self, their full being in whatever they want to do with no limitations or barriers. So very excited that you're having this conversation and expanding it to really talk about, what we are dealing with today. It's not a 1972 bill that only covers sports or girls in athletics. It is the fullness of participation in all academic settings and really working to make sure that we protect those rights for everyone so that they can participate equally.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I really appreciated your thoughts about young people in school settings, girls in STEM, career training programs, all of these. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. But I'd like to ask, before you need to depart, can you share any advice or inspiration that you may have for our guests this evening, including our students, our faculty, staff, professionals who have joined us, and community leaders?
I think be willing to learn, which is such a low bar, because any question you ask me, I'm going to take it back to educate yourself or be willing to learn something about it. That is my universal answer to everything. But I think people take for granted that they know all that there is to know about the challenges, the barriers, or even what Title IX is. So really taking the opportunity to hear people's stories, to hear other people's perspectives on why this is important and why these protections are still necessary. It is not as black and white or as cut and dry as we think it is. We just saw literally play out on the national stage the U.S. gymnast team at the highest levels of competitive sports talk about years of abuse that had been reported and no one was listening to them. So what I would say is listen to people's stories and be willing to learn, be willing to educate yourself, be willing to follow through. I think that there's so much stigma around, especially sexual assault, because there's this impression that it's suspicious. Like a woman has to prove that this actually happened when it should be the other way around. So I would encourage anyone who is operating in these settings to be intentional, to be willing to learn, to step back and reflect on your own practices. Sometimes people, and I find this so often, where people don't even realize how they are unintentionally discriminating or blocking out a group of people. So I think you have to do some self-inventory along the way and say, for me, when I bring up the example of STEM education or career training, I know in my school district, there was one point where in our advanced placement classes, our, really STEM heavy classes, 90% of the participants were young men, because that was the impression. So really doing some self-audits and self-evaluation and step back and say, well, what can I do to invite everybody in, with the same level of equity, at the same level of capacity. And I think it's something that is our challenge today. We have to continue to work on these things and be intentional about them. The fact that in 2022, the US, soccer team is just getting pay equity and parity is a problem. This is something that a conversation that we should not be having over and over again. So be willing to learn, listen to people's story, and acknowledge what they're feeling and work to close those gaps.
Thank you, Congresswoman Hayes. I appreciate your time and joining us tonight. Thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Estela. And Estela, if I may just mention to you the things for you to talk about, a little bit about your background or bio that you would like for us to know that we don't already know, how Title IX has brought about changes from your viewpoint, and then any personal experience with Title IX in regards to the subject matter in your area.
Thank you. Let me begin by saying I wish I could have applauded and everybody heard my applause of Congresswoman Jahana Hayes. She's absolutely wonderful, and we're so proud to have her as a representative. Thank you also to the University of Hartford for doing this celebration. In reviewing what Title IX is, it reminded me how significant this legislation is and how we sort of accept it. But we need to understand the history. We need to understand what it means. And we need to look also for opportunities to continue to ensure that the law that exists and the processes that exist respond to today's societal needs. So thank you again for doing this panel, for asking me to join. Let me tell you a little bit of my experience in higher ed. When I began to teach many years ago, one of my colleagues taught math. And she came back in the fall and she told me she had a baby, and I never knew she was pregnant. She had hidden her pregnancy. She was from India and used to wear a sari so she could wrap the material over her belly. And the reason she did it because there were no maternity laws that protected her. At that time, she would have had to take the semester off and not getting paid because she was pregnant. In 1998, I went to Texas A&M to talk to women in the science department, and they told me that they had to negotiate maternity leaves individually with their deans because there was no such a thing as a policy at the university level. So we're talking about women's rights. We're talking about things that should not have been that way. In terms of sexual harassment, it was sort of normal to for women to know that there were men out there that were sexually harassing women. What we did, because we couldn't go to the human resources, there was no Title IX coordinator. What we did is we would tell each other, we would say, don't go out with that man. He's, protect yourself. Don't be alone with him. It was normal that men could harass women. This is, happened in my lifetime. So the fact that we have now procedures and grievances and opportunities for people to sort of state that they're being harassed and claim justice is really quite an improvement. Let me tell you also a little bit about how higher education has changed. Now more women attend colleges and universities in the United States than men. And that's good, but it's also a sign that we need to do more for ensure that everybody is getting an education. In terms of administration, today, there's only 32% of women presidents in the United States of colleges and universities. More women are presidents of community colleges, the colleges that have more challenges, the colleges that have less resources, and less women are presidents of colleges at the research level, the Stanfords, the Harvards, the Yales, and so on. In terms of law schools, let me tell you what has happened because it's very significant. About 54% of the students attending law school today are women, okay? And that's so significant because those women lawyers are going to be the judges. They're going to be the Supreme Court justices that will look at Roe versus Wade. They're going to look at women's rights. They're going to be deciding issues that affect women and directly. And we need them to be there. In medical school, 51% of the students nowadays are women. Again, significant because medicine and pharmaceuticals test a lot of the cures on men. They don't do it on women's bodies. So we're looking at the need to have women seated at places at the table where decisions are being made about us. I remember going to a meeting of the deans of law schools in the 90s, it was in Chicago. And when you go to a meeting and there's a breakout, you go to the bathroom and there's usually a line in the women's bathroom. There was no line because there were so few women dean that, you know, it was the first time that there was no line to go to the ladies' room. Nowadays, about 34% of the deans of law schools are women. Again, you're seeing the opportunities. What we have seen, and what Representative Hayes mentions in terms of STEM, is that not only opportunities have opened, the law afforded opportunities for women, but support had to be created. Processes and support had to be created to ensure that women were able to take those opportunities and be able to serve. That's how I dedicated my life, not only as an administrator, but to teach women who wanted to be administrators, faculty at a seminar called HERS, and also at the American Council on Education Fellows Program, and other such programs that help women get prepared to be leaders, to be administrators, and serve. We know that when women are presidents and serve in leadership positions, salaries become more similar between men and women. There's less disparity, and more women are invited again in the cabinet level. So it's important to ensure that we continue that track. We continue to ensure that women have those positions and are able to serve, and for women, young students to see themselves represented at the highest level.
Thank you, Estela. Really, I enjoyed the data that you gave us. It is great to hear women lawyers, 54%, women in medical school, 51%.
Right.
And what that's going to mean for our futures and the choices and decisions that are going to be made. So thank you for sharing that. I really honed in on your statement about support needs to be created for women. I think we say that, and I think we're doing that. I think we need, as you have said, we need to be doing more.
Right.
So I definitely agree with you on that. I would like to ask you, though, as a last question before I let you go, for you to also share any advice or inspiration you may have for everyone who is attending tonight's webinar with us before you finish.
I think what Representative Hayes says, it was very, very appropriate, which is educate yourself. When I started in higher education, my Ph.D. is in literature. So I get inspiration from poetry, from poems. And there's a poem that I read maybe 20 years ago by Adrian Rich that has a line that says, the maps they gave us were out of date by years. And what that meant to me at that time was that the things that I was working with 20 years, 30 years ago when I started as an administrator did not fit a woman of color, did not fit a Latina, did not fit myself as a woman, and that what I had to do was invent new things, invent new ways of doing things. And that's, I think, is the inspiration that I want to share, that because it exists doesn't mean it's the right way, that we have to find new ways and we have to do it together to ensure that those that are still not at the table can have a place, can join, can be served, and can have the opportunities that they deserve.
Thank you. Thank you, Estela. Okay, so now our panelist, Dr. Sharon Beverly. So again, I'm going to ask you to share with us some of your background, your bio that perhaps we don't already know, how Title IX has brought about changes in the area that you're in, and sorry.
Well, that was me. I panicked.
And your personal experience with Title IX in regards to the subject area that you happen to be in. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Annette. Of course, Title IX happened well before my era, so I'm just going to be talking about what I was told. But the experiences that I've had have been across the gamut as a student athlete, at the collegiate level, at the high school level, and then as a coach, and how it has affected those experiences through my life. So, when we talk about athletics and Title IX, to hear our Congresswoman say, it's not about athletics, it was about some other things. It really wasn't. I mean, originally it was for exactly what Estela shared with us. It was about increasing the opportunities for women in professional colleges because they weren't getting selected. They weren't getting those admissions rates that were needed. And athletics was a second thought and just kind of took the center stage, which was nice for us for a while. And now we've taken the backstage almost from updates and new renditions of it. You know, I want to paint you a picture. We're in 1972. I want you to wipe everything out that's currently that we would think we know. And I want you to think about going into a store and there's no athletic gear for women at all. There's nothing for you to buy besides maybe some tennis dresses. There are no athletic shoes for you. Not that you choose not to wear, let's say maybe a women's sneaker because you don't like the fit, but there's no women's sneakers for you. There's no women's shoes in terms of athletic gear. When we were in high school, we couldn't just go to a catalog and order a uniform. We had our mothers making uniforms because there were no athletic uniforms. What do you mean you need a basketball uniform? So we've got 1972. There's less than 30,000 girls competing at the high school level, well less than 30,000 competing at the collegiate level. And what we were told was women weren't interested in competing. Enter Title IX. And all of a sudden, we start to get some interest. You know, let's also think about 72. The coaches were all women because men didn't want to coach us. There was no pay, typically. Typically, you traveled by van, not like bus. Like if you're in the high school, you put the high school boys on the bus, you were putting the girls in the van. The high school basketball coach, big deal, big time, right? They're going to search to find the right person for that job. Paying, you know, great pay. Women's, maybe you make a little bit of money that'll kind of pay for your lunch money for maybe a month. So very poor salary, terrible transportation. Your kids don't have uniforms. There's no equipment. Why would you want to coach? So we typically had people's moms who would volunteer. We loved that. But in terms of being experienced, we typically didn't have anyone that was experienced because it didn't pay. The athletics directors at the collegiate level were typically women, separate departments at that time. The men's department had all the money. The women's department had a little bit of money that this woman AD would have to figure out how to fund. Typically just basketball was offered for the women. So that's 1972. In comes Title IX that says, oh, you know what? You got to have equity here. And if you've got a men's basketball program and you're sponsoring it with $100,000, you need to come up with something comparable for your women's team. Huh? What? So now all of a sudden the women's programs are getting money. And now it's very, very not interesting. What's the word I'm looking for? It's desirable now to want to coach the women's team because now all of a sudden there's some salaries being talked about. So now we've got men that want to come in and get these jobs and compete for these jobs. And we've got a women's AD program that nobody wanted, but now that all of a sudden the women are getting some money, typically what happened was presidents said, well, let's combine the two departments. And we had male presidents, as we just had Estela talking about, you know, most of the presidents, we're trying to get more women seating in those chairs. We had male presidents and they picked the male athletics director to oversee both programs. And typically the woman AD would then end up being an associate AD or an assistant AD, but she did not have the power that she had before, all because now there was money in this program. Again, let's think about, they didn't think anyone was interested in women's sports. And we all of a sudden had the AIAW. The NCAA did not want us. They didn't want anything to do with the women. They thought it was a joke. So the women got together, the leaders that we are, and created our own athletics association. And it was the AIAW, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. They started holding national championships. They started with basketball and then expanded into other sports. And again, the NCAA was kind of like, I don't think we want to have anything to do with that. And then in 1975, 1974, I'm sorry, national championship was held actually at my alma mater, Queens College. And it was Queens and Immaculata in the national championship game. And it drew over 4,000 people. And all of a sudden, the people that were naysayers were saying, hey, what's going on there? What do you mean it drew 4,000 people? So our coach, who is Lucille Cavalis, and is a mentor for me, she's a phenomenal, groundbreaking woman in the Christine Grant, not our Christine Grant at UHart, but the Christine Grant era. She said, look, we can market this. We can take this to Madison Square Garden. And people laughed. And she got Madison Square Garden on board and got Queens College and Immaculata to play the very first women's game, collegiate game, at an arena the size of Madison Square Garden. They said, nobody will come. This is going to be a joke. They thought that it was going to be the failure of women's athletics. And it turned out to be one of the biggest successes, because in 1975, we drew over 12,000 people who paid to come to see us play against Immaculata. So we went from less than 30,000 participation to being in an arena and drawing 12,000 people for women's athletics. And the rest was kind of a snowball after that, because then all of a sudden the NCAA said, maybe there's something to this. And then the ESPN said, maybe there's something to this. And then women started to realize we've got a lot of power. We're the ones that usually make the budgets. We're the ones that are spending the dollars. We're the ones that are allocating where our resources are going. And we started paying some attention to the power that we yield. And so today, we've gone from less than 30,000 participating in high school to just short of maybe 100,000 of the boys' participation. In the collegiate ranks, we went from less than 30,000 to almost 300,000. So Title IX has been a phenomenal asset for girls and women who are interested in competing at the high school and collegiate level. We went from just basketball and nothing else to over 8 sports that are commonly offered: basketball, volleyball, softball, track and field, you name it, soccer, huge soccer, right? Not only Division I, the AIAW was offering large college and small college. They didn't do divisions. NCAA, when they stepped in 85, now we've got 3 divisions across, all divisions 1, 2, and 3, and a very competitive program all across the board. I will finish up with saying the one place that has hurt women in terms of Title IX has been in the leadership and administrative opportunities, because where we were over 90% women coaching our girls and women athletic teams at the collegiate level, we are now less than 40%. And in addition, less than 40%, we see an even smaller number of women of color. So it has hurt women in collegiate opportunities. It's hurt women in administrative roles, because we went from over 90%, virtually 100% being the women ADs over our own programs, to less than 12% sitting as an athletics director across all divisions. So it has hurt us in leadership opportunities. So great for participation, as they say, not so much for leadership and coaching opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. So as I listened to you and kind of capture some of the things that you said, I remember a long time ago, there was this some brand, and it was, "You've come a long way, baby."
Mm-hmm.
And we used to hear that a lot for women.
Yes.
We really have, and you've just outlined in the athletics area where we've come from. Talking about power and money and how it went to the male ADs once they realized it was there, and that women now need to realize that they can get that power. We need to go and focus on getting that back and getting women into those positions. You made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing here: believe that you can change the present in the future, or change the future by doing it now. And just the story of what women did back in 1972 and 1974 that really made a difference today. And I think we need to really remember those things and tell those stories to each other so that we can move on. And then the fact that we've been hurt by leadership positions in collegiate opportunities, that we really do need to focus on getting more women up further in the organizations. I want to thank you for sharing all that with us. Very interesting. But I want to ask you one more question. So where do we go from now with athletics, moving this bar forward?
So we really do need women to pursue these fields in athletics. You know, when we talk about we need women presidents, because women presidents are going to open up the doors for other women, we need women athletics directors, and we need women to start to pursue those opportunities. I know as an athletics director, when I advertise jobs, I don't typically see a lot of women applying for these jobs. Now, I like to think it's because there's so many more opportunities for us now than there were maybe 20 or 30 years ago. But I also know that we've got some outstanding women athletes out there, and they would make great coaches and mentors for our young women. So even if you're not going to pursue a coaching opportunity, I just urge you to please reach out to find out how you can help mentor our young women that are coming up now, so that they do pursue some opportunities within athletics, and we can get more women seated in the chair and open up opportunities, equitable opportunities for everyone.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to now turn the program for questions and answers, moderated by Han.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. My first question is for Dr. Lopez, actually, and I was wondering if I could ask you, since you are a member of the Connecticut Board of Ed, are there any policy changes that you're anticipating or hoping for that will help get more women into administrative positions?
At the State Department of Education, I don't anticipate policies in that area. I think, again, what needs to happen is to enable women to get the support and to get the training, not necessarily policies, but to ensure, like Dr. Beverly was saying, that they are prepared to occupy those positions. Part of what happens is, you know, the normal is to have the status quo, and the normal is not to have new people come to the table, and we have to change that. We have to ensure that that is changed by also enabling women to see themselves at that table. That's the way we have done it in higher education, and I think you need to see that also in the K-12 system. I just want to acknowledge, Dr. Beverly, that I'm also a graduate of Queens College. I'm older than you are, but that place shaped me. That place really shaped me and changed my life. So I'm grateful that, you know, that I meet an alumni in this panel discussion. Part of what, you know, again, I just need to add the following. The criticism for Title IX comes from people that are comfortable with the status quo. They don't want to give up. Again, using the metaphor of that seat that they have at the table, they're very comfortable there, and they don't see new people arriving. And that's tragic. That's really tragic. And that's what we have to push. When people say Title IX is enough, it's not enough. It has to continue to evolve. And I'm not sure, I don't have the answers, but we need to ensure that it does evolve, and that at the legislature, people ask who is not being represented, who is not there, who needs to be there. And in our realms, that we ask, how do we support those that need to be there so they can claim a seat at that table?
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. I really appreciate that you mentioned seats at the table, because I think representation is one of the most important things in getting anything moved forward, or also to have any progress in the field, especially for women in sports, women in academic environments, getting women up into those higher education positions and breaking glass ceilings. So I have a question from the audience for Dr. Beverly. So last year, during the NCAA Division I basketball championships, we saw through social media a huge disparity in the accommodations for athletes. I was actually going to bring this up as well, because there was a specific player Sedona. Oh,
Sedona,
think you-
Sedona, yeah.
Sedona Prince.
Yeah, we know who you're
Sedona
talking
Prince from
about.
Oregon. Yes. She videotaped the locker rooms, the differences between the weight rooms, the locker rooms for the Division I athletes at the basketball championships. And one of the attendees was asking about that and saying, what are things that can be done to make sure things like this don't happen in the future?
Well, you know what? That was a great use of social media, wasn't it? We are seeing a lot of folks being held accountable due to social media. And what we have to do is speak out against it. And that's exactly what happened. What an outroar. I mean, literally what the NCAA originally came out with was saying, no, that the accommodations are the same. And then we started getting these pictures. Not only that, I thought it was very striking when she showed, and kudos to the men, because the men's team was playing as well. And they sent pictures to show what they were getting. So they supported. And that to me was one of the things that I thought was most telling. It wasn't the women complaining and the men saying, the men players were supporting the women, which really just warmed my heart. And just at the end, so the men showed the dinner that they got, which was like steak, this huge steak and potatoes and veggies. And the women had meatloaf or something like that. It was like, really? So I think we just have to speak out. You know, it's an era right now of speaking out and no longer being silent. We see it with our support for the LGBTQ community. We see it for Black Lives Matter. We see it with Title IX and people talking about equity for all. It's not just about women. We've got our Paralympics and our Paralympians and our para-athletes. They're all a part of it. So I think we are now in the middle of this awakening for us, right? That we are starting to just speak out and speak up when we see that there's an injustice.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. I would actually like to ask you another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you mentioned in your panelist discussion that there has been a significant decrease in coaching administration for women and women in administrative positions in the field of athletics. Do you have any idea why that might be happening?
That's a very good question. And I don't like to say that it's because we've got men presidents hiring men ADs. I don't think that that's the answer. I do think, though, as Estela was saying, it's important, I believe, that those of us that are sitting in the chair, we call, when you're the AD, we say, you know, you're sitting in the chair. Those of us that are sitting in the chair, I think we have to start to identify leadership that we see in our up and coming women and help them and mentor them so that they can see themselves in a leadership role. I have a mentor who tells me each one teach one. And she's right. And we see it with our men, and that's something that we can learn. Our men ADs will say to a young man, you know, you've got some leadership. Why don't you come be my assistant? Or why don't you work in the sports information office or the athletic communications office? And we as women don't do that. And so that's one thing that I think we need to do. Young men and young women that we see that we feel have leadership qualities and capabilities and potential, talk with them about pursuing roles in athletics and have it get on their radar. And hopefully that will help expand more women into the role.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. I especially appreciate your point that there aren't women occupying enough of these positions, and that's half of the battle. Is women don't believe that they can occupy a position if they don't see anyone else being able to break that glass ceiling or get into that position as well. So I really am glad that you brought that point up. So I have a question for Estela next, if you're ready, Dr. Lopez. So as mentioned, there are more women in administrative roles at community colleges than there are at four-year colleges. What do you think can be done to encourage and empower more women to pursue administrative roles at universities?
I think it's a number of things. It's never a one-shot solution. You have to, again, prepare women to be administrators. You have to encourage them to go to seminars and workshops that help them understand the administrative side, the politics, what it takes, and also the idea that in order to do it, you have to sacrifice your life. That's not necessarily the way to do it. You know, we can be and have rich lives and still be administrators, successful administrators. I think mentoring, like Dr. Beverly mentioned, is very important to see yourself in that position, to see that you can be one of the leaders in an institution. I think women tend to get the jobs that are harder, have less resources, and have more challenges. And that's in a way good, because we tend to care and be committed and be passionate, but it also requires that women have access to any opportunity there is, that we are not only in one area, in one group, in one sector of the higher education realm. So we have to be everywhere. I believe in training, I believe in supporting, I believe in mentoring. And I believe also that once the person is in the position, that they have to have colleagues or peers that help them, because these jobs can be very difficult, and you need someone that you can go to that will support you while you're doing the many challenges and handling the many challenges of the job. I'm sure Dr. Beverly have examples of that, of coaches. You know, if you're facing this situation, what happens? What do you do? And the politics of it. For many women, politics is a bad word. I'm so happy that Representative Hayes doesn't see it that way, that she's there in Congress. But for many women, that's a bad word. So how do we teach women that politics can be a good opportunity, and we need to handle it, and we need to feel comfortable being political, because it's necessary in the types of job that require us to be there.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. So I would like to pose a question to the panel then. A common theme that Dr. Beverly and Dr. Lopez mentioned was uplifting others and mentoring others, which is extremely important in raising another generation of leaders who are women. In terms of mentoring and supporting other women, do you have any advice for those of us who want to uplift other women into leadership positions, or know of people that are trying to get into more administrative positions?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in there. One, I think trying to connect, building a network of support around you is a good thing. So as I see young professionals coming up, I try to help them build a network, because, as Estela was talking about, it's important that you have some folks that you can go to, that you can talk with, that you can talk through problems. When women talk through problems, we are the problem makers. We need to be able to talk through some challenging situations, have that safe space, so that we can work through challenges to come up with good answers. So I think help young professionals that are coming up build that network around them that can be there to be supportive.
I mentor many women, formally and informally. They know, because I've been faculty at this Hearst Institute and in other places, that they can come to me. They're applying for a job. I review the application later. I do mock interviews. I just did one 2 weeks ago through Zoom, and the woman is now a finalist for the position. And I try to help as much as possible in terms of what I have learned and go through. How do I give it to other people? So this is a commitment that I have made, because I found myself not knowing when I started. The advice for young women is that you have to be grateful. Whoever is out there to help you, please be grateful. And gratitude for me is very simple. You send me chocolates or cookies. I just got from Mozzicato a box of cookies, and I'm so happy. That's better than any pay. That's better than anything. So being grateful, and what I ask the people that I mentor is to make a commitment to pay it forward. Like Dr. Beverly said, we have to help. It has to be a chain. It cannot end with me or her. It has to be a chain. We have to make a commitment to continue to help others to have these opportunities. It's essential that we're there. Again, a lot of people invested in the status quo. People don't want to see us there, especially women of color. They don't want to see us there. So it doesn't mean pushing ourselves and opening spaces. It has to be that we're intentional, that we are prepared, that we're ready, and we're going to do well.
Okay, I have to jump in and tell you, you know, I'm a HERS grad. That's all I'm going to say. And Hannah, that's the higher education, it's a sisterhood.
Yeah.
It supports women in academic leadership. So it's just, I'm not surprised to hear Dr. Lopez's role within it, but it's just funny that she's a Queens grad and I'm a HERS grad.
That's it. That's how you do it.
It really is such a small world in the realm of higher education. Everyone seems to know everyone or have a connection somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much, both of you, for your responses. So I guess my next question would be for Estela. How can we get more women into presidential positions at schools and higher education?
Oh my God, they have to apply.
That is true.
They have to apply. They have to. And part of what I was talking, prior to preparing for this conversation is the fact that we need more women also on boards. The boards are the ones that select the president. So you need to ensure that boards of universities and colleges have women. If you have 2 or 3 women, if you're only one, if I'm the only Latina on the board, I cannot make a difference. It's you need at least 3 like minds to really push and change the agenda. So you need more women on boards, more women on corporate boards. In the Scandinavian countries, they have made that a requirement for businesses to have women on their boards to ensure that there's equity, because representation does make a difference. We know that there's research, there's evidence, so that's part of what needs to happen to ensure. And I'm sure, in the athletic world, in the end, in all the organizations, that's also true. If you have more women, then they ask different questions. They look at different perspectives. I just want to, before we end, I just want to honor 2 people that were really the ones that make Title IX happen. Bernice Sandler is the godmother of Title IX. She was the one that pushed and realized that this needed to happen, because she couldn't get a job as a faculty. She had a Ph.D. and they wouldn't hire her because she was a woman. Women didn't need to make as much money. And then Representative Patsy Mink from Hawaii, who introduced the legislation. And I look at Jahana Hayes and I say, my God, that's where women need to be there. So I just want to honor them, because in honoring Title IX, we need to also honor those that fought for it and made it happen. So thank you again.
Thank you, Estela. And not to ignore you, Dr. Beverly, but there actually is another question for Estela. What actions can local boards take, or what actions can local boards of education or boards of trustees in higher ed take to help drive change?
My God, look at data. Now one of the beauties that we have is we look at data. Just look at the data that I cited in terms of law schools, medical schools, boards. What is the representation of women in boards? How are women doing in certain disciplines? How are, in the STEM science, you may have more women going into higher education, but are they really across the different professional fields? Are they being represented? Again, what Dr. Beverly mentioned, coaches, is the equity in everything. So the numbers can give you not the right picture, not the appropriate picture. So one really needs to hone down and look at disaggregate the data to get a picture of, is there's equity? Are we there? Are we really there? Are we really in those fields that we need to be at present?
Thank you so much, Estela. And thank you, Dr. Beverly, as well, for answering all of my questions. I'm now going to pass over the mic to Lisa Cote.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to Annette, our amazing moderator for the first half. Thank you to Hannah as our Q&A moderator, and thank you to our panelists, Estela, Dr. Beverly, and Congresswoman Hayes, even though she had to hop off. This was an incredible conversation, and we are so grateful. We being myself, the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement, Christine Grant, who I work with. We are so grateful for such an engaging and informative conversation this evening. I certainly know that I learned a lot. So thank you. We would also like to thank the Women's History Month Planning Committee and give a special shout out to Dina for helping us get some of our panelists tonight. So thank you to everyone on the Women's History Month Planning Committee for helping put together a wonderful array of programs for this month that will be spanning the month. And I think we have a list of the programs for the rest of the month. Oh, look at that. Thank you, Samantha. We also want to do a special shout out to Samantha for being our tech guru for this evening. So thank you again for joining us today. We do have 3 more Women's History Month programs coming up, as well as our ROGO Distinguished Visiting Lecturer program at the end of this month. So we hope that folks can join us for these. We've got Reclaiming Equity, Indigenous Women, Power and Place this Thursday. Next week, March 8th is International Women's Day, and we will have Dr. Mariko Silver joining us for a great conversation there. And on March 29th, we are actually having an in-person program, and we'll be talking about the Netflix series, The Chair, with 2 professors from the University of Hartford, Carolyn Pay-Rosine and Peggy Beauregard. And then for our ROGO Distinguished Visiting Lecturer, we will actually have a panel discussion, and we'll be talking about building resiliency connection and mental health related to the pandemic. And then we also wanted to share one additional resource that the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement is rolling out, which is our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice glossary of foundational terms and affirming language. I don't think I kept that slide in here, but I'll put a link in the chat. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you again at some of our upcoming programs.